Well, welcome everybody. It's so good to see you here tonight. Welcome to the St. Louis Zoo. I'm Louise Bradshaw. I'm the Director of Education here at the zoo, and it's indeed my pleasure to welcome you to this fabulous science seminar on a topic I am just fascinated to hear more about. As all of you are, I understand we're competing with Caroline Kennedy tonight. So I guess people here are more interested in bees than poetry, perhaps, or the Kennedys. In any case, we'll get a probably a little wrap up in the paper about her talk, but this is really, really powerful, important stuff that we'll be hearing tonight. Along the line of pollinators, there are a couple of other things I'd like to bring to your attention. We have a really neat event coming up this June, our annual pollinator dinner. It'll be June 18th. How many people have attended that in the past? It's really a lot of fun, right? Yeah. Yay. So come on down. It's an event where it's a wonderful dinner. Practically all the food items are pollinated by these wonderful, amazing insects. There'll be displays and activities to learn more about pollinators, chance to taste different kinds of honey, a chance to meet a lot of the folks who are involved. Probably some of you here will be there, staffing tables and doing different activities. There'll be more information on the zoo's website. So again, that's June 18th for our annual pollinator dinner. Another thing that we have coming up that some of you may be interested in, yet this month on April 16th, we have one of our conservation conversations here at the zoo, and we'll be featuring a really fascinating talk about nature and nurture. You know, it's one of the classic debates that we always have about human nature and how people are formed and shaped and what are the important influences. We'll be hearing from Adrian Cerezo, who is our Associate Director of Conservation Education Research, and he'll be talking about his groundbreaking work and looking at how the influence of nature on children at very young ages, the birth through 5, is really, really profound and really important. And it's this kind of work that's actually shaping a lot of our programs and our conservation education here at the St. Louis Zoo. So want to make sure you have a chance to hear that. It should be fascinating. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rose Jansen from the Academy of Science, who will introduce tonight's speaker.
Good evening. So my name is Rose, as Louise said. Welcome. We're very pleased that you're able to join us here this evening, and we're very pleased to be partnering with the St. Louis Zoo to bring you science seminars and conservation conversations. For those of you who are not familiar with the Academy, I'm going to take just a moment to tell you a little bit about who we are. We're an independent science organization supported entirely through community contributions, and we've been connecting science in the community for a very long time, since 1856. We have a long-standing mission to advance the public understanding of science and inspire the next generation of scientists and science advocates, and we do that through a very broad range of free and low-cost public science seminars, trips, and tours that celebrate science at venues throughout the region. And you can find more information on the Academy and our community-wide public events and talks at our website, academyofsciencestl.org. You may also visit us on Facebook or Twitter, or pick up some of our literature that is at the visitor's desk just outside the auditorium. If you're interested in helping to support the Academy's many science opportunities for children and adults throughout the metro region, there are some membership brochures also out at the visitor's desk, or you may come see me after tonight's talk. I'd be happy to talk with you about becoming a member of the Academy. If you'd like to receive e-notification of upcoming Academy and St. Louis Zoo public lectures and events, there will be some e-news sign-up sheets that will make their way around the audience this evening. And if you're a student and you need to verify your attendance, please come see me after tonight's Q&A. I do want to mention a couple upcoming events you might have an interest in attending. This Friday at 9:30 a.m. in the J.C. Penney Conference Center on the UMSL campus, as part of our On Science seminar series, we have Associate Professor of History, Dr. Fred Fowles. He'll be talking about the history of the St. Louis fur trade. The event is $10 per person, and you do need to register to attend, and you may do so by logging onto our website at academyofsciencestl.org or by calling 314-537-7889. And then on Saturday morning at 10 a.m., you can help us raise funds for the Academy's teen science programs, which include the Junior Academy of Science, teen science cafes, and science career explorations by joining us at the High Point Theater for a showing of Beetlejuice, a 1988 comedy horror film directed by Tim Burton. Tickets are $5 per person and can be purchased at the door. This event is actually an idea that came from our Science Cafe Youth Leadership team members. There is a service component to their participation on the teen leadership team, and they decided they wanted to help raise funds for continued teen science programming by hosting a movie morning. So we hope you'll come out and support their creative efforts. And along those lines, on Monday, April 15, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Webster Groves Public Library Meeting Room, middle and high school students are welcome to attend our next Gateway Teen Science Cafe on emergency room medicine with Washington University Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine and Director of the university's Simulation Studies for Emergency Medicine, Dr. Jason Wagner. This event is open only to teens in grades 6 through 12. It is free, and refreshments are served, but you do need to register to attend. And then on Monday, April 8 at 10:30 a.m. at the Center of Clayton, University of Missouri St. Louis history professor Dr. Kevin Fernlund talks about popular science and Western culture from the cosmos of Alexander von Humboldt to the cosmos of Carl Sagan. You need to register to attend. On Thursday, April 11 at 1 p.m. at the Dennis and Judith Jones Visitors Center in Forest Park, Dr. Carla Armbruster with Webster University will be talking about dogs from wolves, what we're learning from science about the evolution of dogs and what it means to us. You do need to register to attend this event as well. On Thursday, April 18 at 7 p.m. at the Missouri History Museum, sociologist Dr. Lisa Martino-Taylor talks about contextualizing Cold War Army tests in the city of St. Louis from 1953 to 1965 in Without Consent. This event is free and open to all, and you do not need to register to attend. And then finally, on Saturday, April the 20th, from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m., and in partnership with the University of Missouri St. Louis, we are hosting a citizen science conference open to all educators, community and homeschool group leaders, and parents, and anyone wanting to know more about citizen science and citizen science opportunities. We have even more science talks and tours in April and May, too many for me to mention here. Again, you can find more information on all our upcoming science opportunities on our website, or please feel free to pick up some of the event flyers and Academy literature we've left for you to take with you today before you leave. So with that said, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Gerald Hayes. Dr. Hayes is an apiary expert and is currently Monsanto's Beeologics Bee Health Lead. He served 2 terms as president of the Apiary Inspectors of America and is a founding member of the Colony Collapse Disorder Working Group. Dr. Hayes is a science advisor for Project Apis mellifera and is a contributor to the American Bee Journal's Q&A column, The Classroom, and author of a book by the same name, as well as author or co-author of numerous published research papers. He previously served as chief of the Apiary Inspection Section for Florida's Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and he is here with us tonight to talk about Monsanto's commitment to honeybee health. Won't you please join me in welcoming Dr. Gerald Hayes.
Good evening. I am honored to be here, and I thank Rose and the Academy of Sciences for inviting me, and St. Louis Zoo for having such a wonderful, wonderful facility here, and each and every one of you coming out on a nice, almost spring evening to be here. So I appreciate that. Who here are beekeepers now? Okay, quite a few. Good. That's terrific. And the rest of you hopefully are here because you have an interest in this marvelous insect that does so much for us. Not that or probably that you really need to know this, but let me just give you some more of my background to frame for you the opportunity I have to be here with you tonight and why I'm at Monsanto. I started out in life as a high school teacher, and I hated it. And some of you have chuckled and probably know something about that. So I went into private business, and I had a gentleman work for me who he and his brother were beekeepers. And I thought to myself, nobody really knows a beekeeper. Who knows a beekeeper? This is like very interesting. Everybody knows about honey and about bees, but nobody actually knows a beekeeper. That was amazing. And so I picked his brain, and it was even more interesting. And then I started reading, getting books. Back then we didn't have the internet. Getting books and reading everything I could about it. and got a beehive for my backyard and turned into the consummate backyard beekeeper, just like some of you are or perhaps hope to be. And then after a couple years of that, I thought, can somebody actually make a living doing this and take care of a family? And so I have a very, very patient and wonderful wife. And at that time, Ohio State University had a program in apiculture, study of honeybees. And so we did that, moved to Ohio, and did that program. And then from there, I worked for the USDA Bee Breeding and Stock Lab in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for a little while. And then for you beekeepers who know Dadant and Sons, a very largest in North America beekeeping supply company up in Hamilton, Illinois, they offered me a job for product development and research and development. And so we moved up there and lived in West Central Illinois for 18 years. And then the state of Florida recruited me as the apiary inspector for the state of Florida. Florida had about 300,000 colonies and about 1,000 beekeepers at that time. And I had 14 full-time inspectors because in the state of Florida, we registered and inspected every beekeeper every year because bees were so important to Florida agriculture. At that time, a colleague of mine at the University of Florida, Dr. Jamie Ellis, and I were looking for better ways to control honeybee pest predators and diseases. And we're invited to a workshop in the USDA office there that how they were going to control mosquitoes that carry malaria using this new technology called RNAi. And Jamie and I thought, well, why can't we do that for honeybees? And so we started down this path. And at that time, it was just at the beginning of colony collapse disorder that there was this another company, Beeologics, who had this technology, and they found us and we found them and started to share resources, and I got some funding from the Florida State Legislature, and we started looking at a non-chemical, non-GM way to control honeybee diseases. Monsanto in turn purchased Beeologics, and if you can picture, who here has been to a game at Busch Stadium? Okay, most of you. Seats about 44,000 people. Monsanto has about 22,000 people. So if you can see the stadium half full on one side with Monsanto employees, and if you look way up high in the nosebleed seats on the left, there's one guy, 1/22,000th of Monsanto, who's the bee guy. So this was an amazing opportunity because Monsanto never had a relationship with beekeepers, nor beekeepers with them, but Monsanto knew how important honeybees were to sustainable agriculture, to what they wanted to do, and so are putting themselves out in front to try to solve some of these honeybee health issues in a safe, sane, and reliable and sustainable way. And so I've been here a little over a year in January, and so I'm the new guy on the block, but have been in the industry for 30 plus years, and as Rose said, write a column in the American Bee Journal, question and answer column in the book, and been on lots of things. So you're looking at a beekeeper in a suit and a tie. And so what I would like to ask you is, can I take off my tie? Thank you. You can only do that for so long, you know? So what I want to do this evening is talk about honeybees in general, agriculture in general, the things that are impacting honeybees, the industry, how that affects you, and how I want you to think about this maybe differently, more holistically, and how you can help, because we all can help. Louise, raise your hand. This is Louise. I had breakfast with Louise this morning. Now, Louise is, fairly small, but she's got a healthy appetite, doesn't she? This is Louise's breakfast. And as you can see up in the upper left, we have some granola stuff. It's got fruit and almonds and that granola stuff. But those fruit and almonds, of course, have to be pollinated by an insect in order to produce that fruit or that nut. And then we have juice. That comes from fruit that has to be pollinated by insect honeybees. Coffee. Coffee's pollinated by honeybees to a certain degree. Cream. Honeybees pollinate alfalfa, which feeds the cow that makes the milk that makes the cream for the coffee. Some eggs. Wonderful pile of fruit here. All there because of honeybees. Some toast and jam. So I wanted to see what this breakfast would look like All right, Sean. Where'd Sean go? Well, that's the only slide you're going to see tonight. Thank you very much. Here comes Sean to save me. Sean was telling me earlier he wants to be a beekeeper. Is that right, Sean?
That's absolutely right.
Terrific. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. This is what Louise's breakfast would look like without honeybees. Granola, the granola stuff is still there, but the fruits and the nuts are gone because there wasn't an insect to take pollen from point A to point B to actually fertilize a fruit or a nut. Juice is all gone because the fruit wasn't available. Coffee's still there, but down a little bit because honeybees pollinate coffee, but not 100%. The cream's all gone because now we have nothing to feed our dairy cattle. Eggs are still there. That nice big pile of fruit, those melons, those berries, all those things are gone because we didn't have honeybees or other pollinators to move that pollen around. And then the jam on our toast is gone. So this is a remarkable display of how important honeybees are, and other pollinators in here too, but honeybees are foundational keystone pollinator of agricultural crops. But this is what would happen. Certainly we could live on this. Our ancestors lived on a lot less and lived on wind-pollinated foods, rice and wheat and corn and barley and rye and those types of things. But we have gone further. We have this whole array of food that you see every time you go to Schnucks or Dierberg's or the Supercenter that come from the United States and other places that are very, very important to our diet for nutrition, for variety. And I doubt that we could go backwards to eating what our ancestors ate nutritionally and longevity-wise and everything else. It wasn't too many decades ago, we had about 5 million colonies. For those of you who are not beekeepers, those stack of white boxes are called colonies in the United States. Now we're down to 2.4 million colonies of honeybees. We've had a precipitous drop. A lot of that is demographics. A lot of us have moved from the country to the city. But there have been all sorts of other things that have impacted honeybees over the last 30 years or so that has caused this precipitous drop. And so the question is this a bad thing? Are we at a tipping point? Is this okay? I don't know. But I can tell you that the apiary industry is under siege from lots of pests, predators, and diseases. A lot of them come from someplace else. We have bacteria, and we have funguses, and we have microsporidia, and we have big parasites. We have viruses. We have small hive beetles. We have wax moths. We have all sorts of things. And some of these things we didn't have before. Honeybees didn't evolve with them. Most of these things came from someplace else. We have Varroa mites, which we'll talk about in the middle, from Asia. We have Nosema from someplace in Asia as well. We have a whole bunch of viruses, but all those have led to this. I've been a member of a group called Bee Informed Partnership, BIT, and we've taken a survey of beekeepers every year. And these are the losses in a window in time of honeybee colonies as they come out of winter. This is just a snapshot. But as you can see, we have about a 30% average of honeybee colony losses over the years. And in the next few months, if you haven't already read about colony losses this year, preliminary data seems to indicate that it's going to be probably around 40 or 50% loss of honeybee colonies. Now, little honeybee biology here. You can take a honeybee colony, if it's still alive, and you can split it. You can make 2 honeybee colonies out of this by doing some management things and introducing a queen and what have you. If we didn't have that biology of honeybee to do this, we wouldn't be having this talk tonight. They'd be gone because you couldn't replace them. If you're a small business person, not a hobby person, hobby beekeepers are wonderful, but if we're talking about a small business person, a commercial beekeeper, and you're losing 30% of your business every year, is that a good business model? No, it's a terrible business model. It's a horrible business model. You can't sustain that. Are we at a tipping point? I don't know. There are more acres of pollinator-dependent crops planted now than any time in our history. Apples, pears, peaches, blueberries, strawberries, cucumbers, pumpkins, everything that just about is a fruit, a nut, or a vegetable has to have this pollination event take place where a honeybee goes and visits a flower and takes the male element, pollen, and takes it to another place on the flower that allows a seed to be fertilized. Because if a seed's not fertilized, that fruit is under no obligation to build the fruit around that place. There's nothing there. Look at watermelons, seeded watermelon. Let's say they have 1,000 seeds. Each one of those seeds has to have a pollen grain associated with it in order to produce a seed. If a seed isn't produced, that watermelon plant doesn't build a watermelon around that spot. Do you see flat-sided watermelons in the store, or flat-sided cucumbers, or curly cucumbers, or a flat-sided apple? No, you don't, because they don't meet standards. And so the ones that are deformed or didn't form at all get thrown in the trash, which is a terrible waste, and that's probably another talk. But we have more pollinator-dependent acres than ever before, and how do they become productive to take care of and feed us and our families and our brothers and sisters in the world? Colony losses from this 30% loss, which is going to be 40 or 50% this year. Globalization and homogenization of pests. We are in a global economy. Things move around. You can get on a plane at Lambert and be in Beijing in probably 25 hours, and back and forth in Africa and what have you. And with this movement, there's always pests that go along with the travelers, and cargo, and what have you. And when a new pest predator disease is introduced to an organism that has no natural defense, it hasn't evolved, hasn't developed in association with that, you always have losses. Production agriculture, not picking on production agriculture because we all eat very well because of production agriculture. You all ate very well tonight because of that. But for honeybees, 500 acres of pumpkins is not normal or natural. Honeybees require a diversity of pollens. As they visit flowers, they collect pollen as a food source. They collect nectar as a food source to turn into honey. And they need a variety of that. Each pollen in a flower is different, has different proteins, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and what have you. So they have to have a variety of foods in order to be nutritionally healthy. It's kind of like Michelle's food plate. We eat different foods, a variety of foods every day to balance our diet and get the nutritional elements we need. Honeybees are the same. So if you have 500 acres of pumpkins, that's terrific on one hand, but for a pollinator, it's not very good because they don't get the nutritional resources that they need. Production beekeeping, just like production agriculture. Having 2 colonies or 6 colonies in your backyard is different than having hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands. Largest beekeeper in the United States has about 100,000 colonies. 100,000 of those white box units. And there's many, many more that have thousands, and I'll show you a picture here in a few minutes. Pesticide misuse. We all think of, oh my goodness, pesticide misuse in agriculture and what have you, but we're talking about ourselves as well. You all probably have used pesticides, and if you are typical, you haven't read the label, and if 1 teaspoon per gallon is good, you know, a little bit more isn't going to hurt, is it? Because that bug was pretty big. And beekeepers have to use pesticides themselves within a colony to take care of this Varroa mite, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Eliminating productive locations. You know, your roadsides are clean, your parks don't have any dandelions in them, your yards don't have any dandelions in them. Those fence rows that used to have weeds of flowering plants are gone. And so these type of places where honeybees and other pollinators got food, foraged for pollen and nectar, are growing and diminishing. Then there's entomophobia, fear of insects. And for you beekeepers, you here will know this, but for you who aren't, as much as people have empathy for honeybees now in the honeybee industry and beekeepers, and how they have a big warm fuzzy for them, you put a colony of bees in your backyard next to their backyard, and they're going to call you or city council or something. The world changes for them because they're entomophobes too. So are we. Entomophobe, fear of insects. Who wants cockroaches in your kitchen? You know, there's always one guy in the back. There's always that one guy. But we're the same. And beekeepers have embraced this relationship with an insect. And so there is this dichotomy of support and fear for this insect among a lot of the population, which sometimes restricts beekeepers and beekeeping locations. Low honey prices. Local, regional honey is the best, most tasty food ever. But sometimes I think that beekeepers are apologetic for producing it and really don't get the value out of it they possibly could or should, because a lot of this drives health of beehives because you have to do a lot of management things to take care of bees. Low pollination prices. Beekeepers are moving out of California right now. The big event that is keeping the commercial beekeeping industry alive is pollination of almonds in California right now. Almonds absolutely, positively have to have honeybee pollination to produce a crop. So there were 1.6 million colonies of honeybees moved to California because California does not have enough honeybees themselves. So these colonies came from the southeast and the mid-Atlantic and the north and every place else to fill this void. And they were getting paid about $200 a colony for about a 3-week period to pollinate almonds. Almonds produce about 8,000 pounds per acre, and you know what the price of almonds is in the store. $200 a colony, and they have to have 2 colonies per acre, so that's $400. You know, and I will stick my neck out. That's not even lunch money. That's not even snack money. So for something that a grower absolutely positively needs, I would hope that low pollination prices would not be low anymore. That is not 2 beehives in your backyard. This is just one part of a commercial beekeeper's operation. As you can see, we talked about production agriculture. This is production beekeeping. This is no different. In the real world, honeybees space themselves out a couple hundred yards in the woods, in cavities, and what have you. Here, the model is you don't do that. You have to put 6 of them on a wooden pallet, bunch them up so that you can mechanically move them around, load them on semis, take them to places. You have to treat these because this is like an elementary school. These guys are sharing everything. Every pest, predator, and disease because of the way they have to be handled, manipulated, and managed. Now, if you look at these also, as we talked about, and as you know, honeybees have this wonderful relationship with flowering plants. They develop this relationship. They lure, they offer honeybees a sweet, sugary fluid called nectar, in turn for the honeybee to visit and transport that very, very important pollen to another flower so that they can produce a seed and nut or what have you, to reproduce themselves or to feed us. This model right here is unnatural. You have to have a lot of inputs to keep this going. And because they have to visit flowers to eat, do you see any there? Are there any in the trees? Are there any on that field? No, there's nothing. Because, wrong time of the year perhaps, but even if this field and every tree in there had a flower on every inch, you think there would be enough to feed those colonies? No. And the foods, supplemental foods that beekeepers sometimes have to feed their colonies are nutritionally incomplete. We have not yet developed a food for honeybees in this situation to keep them alive and healthy while they're doing this activity. So this is a tough, tough business model for the beekeeper and tough for the honeybee as well. This is probably 70 to 80% of the problem in the beekeeping industry. I have to do this, and for you beekeepers that have done this before, just do it anyway, just because, okay? Make a fist. I can't leave till you make a fist. Put it someplace on your body. Proportionally, this is how large the Varroa mite is to a honeybee's body. Large, significant parasite from an Asian species of honeybee. It made the jump from that to our European genetically based species of honeybee. Feeds on the bee's hemolymph, sucks its blood, pierces a cuticle, leaves open wounds, vectors, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, just like a mosquito does when it bites you or I, causes immunosuppression as it injects its salivary fluid into the bee so that it can keep feeding and the bee's immune system won't try to drive it away or close up that wound. Big, big, significant parasite. Think of Varroa as a dirty needle, doing all those things. Piercing, vectoring, leaving open wounds, causing this immunosuppression. If we could get rid of Varroa mites non-chemically, safely, sanely, we would take care of 70 to 80% of honeybee health issues, I guarantee you. Because beekeepers have to introduce chemicals into a beehive. We are trying to kill a bug on a bug. And so what chemical companies did when Varroa was introduced 30 years ago was take old off-patent stuff off the shelf, reformulate it, and give it to beekeepers so that this mite could be killed or controlled and not cause acute damage to the honeybee itself. Worked pretty well for a while. Mites, the best thing they do is develop resistance to things. So they had to go to harsher and harsher chemicals. Honeybees are small, fuzzy creatures. They're fuzzy because of this pollen transport job that they have. The pollen from flowers that require insect pollination are called entomophilous flowers, and the pollen is kind of sticky. It sticks to the bees and is transported to this other places on the flower. Well, the bee is grooming herself all the time because it's hard to fly with a lot of things on you. And these miticides for this Varroa mite, of course, get on the surface of the bee, and as they groom, they ingest this stuff. And it goes to every organ of their body. It's no different than you taking an aspirin. That aspirin, that salicylic acid, it goes and takes care of your headache pretty well. But it also goes to your belly button and your little toe and your earlobe and every place else. The same thing with honeybees. And so we have some collateral damage just because we haven't figured out how to non-chemically take care of Varroa mites. Some of the chemicals require, if they're organic acids or what have you, require respirators. If you notice, the beekeeper is wearing gloves, sometimes latex or nitrile gloves. These chemicals can have effects on humans as well. And so this is not a small issue if a beekeeper has to protect himself or herself from the products that they're using to control Varroa mites. Being on the Colony Collapse Working Group since its inception, we were looking at trying to find out ways to control this disorder. It wasn't a disease, we knew it was a disorder. So one of the things we looked at was chemicals found in beehives. What were those doing? What could they be done? What could be found in those? And so we took samples of the bees, baby bees and larvae, and beeswax. This is a significant component of this because beeswax is a chemical sponge. It's a fatty acid and it absorbs all sorts of chemicals as it comes in contact with. So we took the beeswax too and analyzed those. And what we found was 100% of the time, this is one of the miticides, the Varroa, and 100% of the time, this is fluvalinate. There are some metabolites of that, and then bees, because they can forage efficiently in about a 2, 3 to 5 mile radius of the colony, are exposed to a lot of things and bring those back. But the beekeeper himself or herself was responsible for 2 chemicals in there 100% of the time. What happens when you mix those two chemicals in a beehive or in a beeswax matrix? Nobody knows. EPA is really, really good about testing chemicals to be sure that they do what they're supposed to do under certain conditions. What they can't do is guess what happens when you mix things together. But in this case, beekeepers are having to do that. And because beeswax is this chemical sponge, it hangs on, it sequesters everything. What happens when you mix these things? And we still don't know the answer to that other than we don't think it's good. Colony collapse disorder. Just so you know, the bees are gone, for the most part. They've been there recently because there's signs of them. These brown cappings here indicate that there's baby bees behind there. So there was bees there to feed these bees and take care of them for a while. You can't see it here, but there's pollen stored and some nectar. That would have been the food source. So bees were out doing what bees do, collecting these things so they could feed the brood. But as you can see, the bees, for the most part, are gone. For a 30, 40,000 individual colony, 30 or 40,000 workers in a colony, to have a couple hundred left is different. It's new. It's not normal. Social insects don't leave their queen because the queen is always found in there. She's the fertile female. She's the future. But she's always there. She hasn't left. This isn't swarming. This isn't absconding. The bees have just left. They've been beamed up. They're gone. The normal ratio of bees to brood, what we call baby bees to take care of, is about 2 worker bees to 1 of those cells that take care of that developing larva. They feed them, they keep them warm, they do all those things until they can grow up and are ready to pupate and emerge as an adult. When that ratio reverses, that you have 1 bee to 2 or more cells, that's what the definition of CCD is. The queen's always present, as I said. Low numbers of Varroa, low numbers of another mite called tracheal mites. Nosema, which is a gut parasite, is found in about half the samples, but nothing significant. These are the normal suspects, but these aren't in high enough amounts to amount to anything to explain the dramatic drop in the population of these honeybee colonies. So what we're looking at in this is a multi-dimensional problem, challenge. Primary stress. And we've been doing a lot of these things for a long time, but picking up beehives, putting them in a truck and moving them, we've done this for a very long time. Certainly it's stressful to bees, but without any other negative influences, it seemed to be okay. You could move them, you could transport them, but think of taking tens of thousands of colonies, say from Florida to California for almond pollination. Different time zones, no food, breathing diesel fumes for 3 days, can't be good. Then we have the Varroa mites, which we talked about. We absolutely know that this big parasite is a big, big problem. Then we have nutrition and pesticides. Pesticides the beekeeper introduces because of Varroa control. And perhaps pesticides that are exposed in the environment, management issues, and then all these secondary things, when they get weak, move in. Because I'm going to pick on Louise again. We can take Louise and we can feed her an incomplete, nutritionally incomplete diet of Hershey bars. She might like it for a while, but it's not going to help her long term. We can put a parasite the size of a rat on Louise, because proportionally that's what it would be like. We can expose Louise to diseases. We can take her to barns and to one of the floors and have people cough in their face. And then we can spray Raid in her face every day. Not going to kill her. And then load her on a plane to Kathmandu. And I guarantee you, Louise will get sick. That's just what happens. And this is what we're doing to honeybee colonies right now. Same thing. Whoops. All right. This is Honeybee Health. This will be on the test. You have the papers in front of you, don't you? This is Honeybee Health. There's a lot of things going on in Honeybee Health. You know, we have these ag things that everybody's pointing their finger at that may or may not be there, but monocultures absolutely positively don't give adequate diet or nutrition. And then the acreage that is there. We have honeybee food, less diversity. We talked about you have to have a diversity of pollens to get those essential amino acids in order to be healthy, to have nutrition. We have, climate, region, planting season. The drought last year, not only was it bad for farmers and wildlife and plants and what have you, it's hard on honeybees because if nothing is growing and it's 115 degrees, that is a significant stress which carries over because our European honeybees are always preparing for winter. That's what they do. That's why we keep them, because they have figured out that if you can store a lot of honey and a lot of food, you can make it through the winter yourself, have a little at an end, but they always store more than they actually need, and that's what the beekeeper harvests. But if that's not there, and you don't have nutritionally complete supplemental foods, that has long-term effects. Then we have all these pathogens and parasites, the Varroa mites and the bacteria and immunosuppression that we talked about. We have beekeeper practices. How do they manage? How do they take care of Varroa? What are they doing for diseases? We have those miticides that beekeepers use and antibiotics because bees have bacterial diseases too, but that is a stressor on honeybees as well. And then how does all this affect the beneficial microbes that are in the bees' guts? Because they have that just like we do. And honeybees, and most of you probably know this, can't eat pollen, not by itself. Pollen is designed to be tough, to survive being bounced around from flower to flower, UV rays, drying out, being too wet. And so it has a very, very hard coating on it. And bees don't have chewing, crunching mouth parts, so they can't crunch it up and eat it. So what they do is when they collect it, they add bacteria and what have you that actually get inside the pollen through the micropore, which is where the sperm would come out, up to the micropore and start eating this stuff and fermenting the pollen and breaks it open and lets the goodies out. So if you mess up the microbes that are there by feeding too many antibiotics, you change this whole fermentation process in a honeybee's nutrition. Then you have, beeswax is a chemical sponge, and we talked about bee bread, and that is honeybee health. And you only have to have a couple things out of whack in this thing to send a cascade of additional honeybee health issues that beekeepers have to contend with later on. Let's talk about ecosystems. Everybody here, I'm sure, knows what an ecosystem is. Forest Park's over here. Wonderful location. You've been to the woods, you've been to the river. These are locations where you have trees and bushes and bugs and trees and all those things that are in balance. One thing is not dominating. There is this balance where each is basically a symbiont of the other. And all these groups play a critical role, but no one group is dominating. But that dynamic can change, right? You're going to have a flood, you're going to have a fire, tornado, wipe things out. But healthy ecosystems will rebalance themselves relatively quickly. So let's look at a honeybee colony as an ecosystem. You have those same kind of parts and pieces to them. You have workers of different ages that have different jobs, different castes. So you have nurse bees and foragers and guard bees and all these other kind of things. You have the queen laying eggs, sometimes up to 2,000 a day. You have bees going out to forage. You have comb. You have the food coming in. And all this, if it's in balance, will allow a colony to prosper and grow and store that food we talked about as they are always preparing for winter. That will be in balance. But there can be those dramatic changes in the honeybee colony. You can have Varroa mites go out of control. You can have a disease. You can have a drought and there's no food available. You can have the beekeeper apply a miticide inappropriately. You can have all these things, or all these things together, and cause that system to change. Because this is what a healthy ecosystem looks like. And we will see this, I've been told, in a few weeks. Is that true? All right, just want to be sure. Honey is wonderful. Honey is great. It's a wonderful food. It's almost like a wine. Different months, different years are going to be different because there's different flowering plants that bees are visiting and bringing back nectar from. Each plant produces a little bit different nectar, has a little bit different sugar concentrations and vitamins and minerals and phenolics and everything else. Wonderful, wonderful food that I encourage you who may not be eating it now to eat even more of it. But this is why honeybees are important. Those are pollen grains on a honeybee. Pollen is the male element of a flower, contains a sperm that has to fertilize a seed eventually on a plant of that species. And this plant-bee relationship, you can't change it. That's what has developed. That's what's evolutionarily been efficient to help that plant reproduce, and now to feed us very, very well. So this is where Monsanto and me coming to Monsanto comes in. We have been talking about Varroa control and disease control in honeybees ever since I've been in the industry. And the best we could ever do was beg universities and beg the government and USDA and industry to give us their cast-off stuff. We're still talking about Varroa 30 years after its introduction. We can't even control a bug on a bug. So now, this big, successful seed company who has way smart people, unbelievable, and research equipment, and has now a commitment to honeybees, is why I'm here. I have my neck way outside of my shell, folks, because this is a gamble. I don't know that this will be successful, but I do know that if we don't try, we will never, ever know. Ever know. So let me tell you what we're doing. RNAi, I mentioned that to you before. Beeologics, Dr. Jamie Ellis, University of Florida, my office, working on this stuff called RNAi. Real quick, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Every cell in your body, there's a nucleus, right? Inside that nucleus is your DNA. DNA is the code for you. Everything about you. Every cell has a nucleus and has all your DNA. All of it. But in that particular cell, sometimes that cell has certain jobs it has to do. Is it responsible for red blood cells or white blood cells or antibodies or healing a wound or what have you. It has to do something. So how in the world do those instructions in the DNA get to that part of the cell that it can tell that part of the cell to do something, to turn a protein on, because everything about ourselves is turning a protein on or turning it off. And so what happens is basically the DNA throws out the instructions and its cousin, RNA, picks it up and takes it to that cell site where it turns a protein synthesis on. Ooh, we need to make more red blood cells. But you can't make red blood cells all the time, or that's another disease. So what the cells do sometimes is say, ooh, we need to turn that off. So it sends out instructions, RNAi, I stands for interference, that turns that function off. Normal, natural process. It's a protein itself, RNA. It's happening in you right now. You ate it for supper because it's in every cell, every plant, every livestock, everything. That's how cells talk within itself to turn things on or off. It's not chemical. It's not GM. It's a normal, natural process. And this is basically just a diagram of what I told you. RNA either turns a protein on or turns it off. It's happening in you right now. And if you want to see a very cool video about it, it's on YouTube. And if you write real fast, or just go to Google and put in RNAi, it'll come up with a bunch of them. But this one is particularly good. And this is an article in Science about how they discovered RNAi. A couple guys got the Nobel Prize for it in 2006, I believe. So this is really, really new technology that we're still learning about. But what do you do in the meantime? This is going to take some time, right? This is not going to happen tomorrow. If it would, it'd be very cool, but it's probably not. So we talked about honeybee nutrition. Monocrops, poor nutrition, what are you going to do? So what we've done is partner with PAM called Project Apis mellifera, and you can search them up as well. They're a huge, huge NGO in California that works to help honeybees, honeybees especially that are going to almond pollination. And so what they're doing is they want to plant forage crops. Honeybees go to almond pollination in February, March. As wonderful that you've heard about California is, you know what's blooming in Northern California in February or March? Same thing as blooming here. Nothing. And so you bring in 1.6 million colonies to nothing. And you feed them nutritionally incomplete diets, which has long-term effects for those honeybee colonies, because they don't stay there all year. They go to other places, and if you're not healthy going to other places and you're sick, things go down. So they are working on planting these forage crops in these holding areas where beekeepers bring their colonies before they're allowed to move into almonds. And in almond acreage, those fence rows, in between the rows that we talked about, because almond growers realize how important honeybees are to their success. And they want healthy colonies coming back as well. So why is all this important? Because honeybees play an essential role in agriculture and in the environment. Simple as that. Monsanto knows that. Honeybees are responsible for lots and lots of dollars of those foods. 30% of honeybees are dying every year. Monsanto is big on sustainability. And Monsanto has made this commitment to honeybee health, non-chemically, non-GM. Repeat after me. non-chemically, non-GM. Because they know this is what's going to happen. We have 7 billion of us on the earth right now. As far as I know, this is the first time we've ever done this. And so every morning we wake up, it's new. And by 2030, another 17 years, there's going to be another 1.4 billion people. That's like adding another China to the earth. And do you think these people want to eat and have families and do stuff? Absolutely. And because of the growth in wealth in Asia, China, India, Southeast Asia, they have more money. And when you have more money, do you want to eat rice every day? No. You want fruits, you want vegetables, you want meat, and more. Chinese want to get up to about 140, 50 pounds of meat per year per person in the U.S. They're up to about 70, but they want to get to 140, just like everybody else. And they want fruits, they want vegetables, they want nuts. You know where most of the almonds go that are produced in California? China. And to do that, you have to grow more chickens and pigs and what have you, which requires grain production to go up. Why do you think farmers are planting fence row to fence row? And why bean prices are whatever they are and corn is whatever it is? Because there's a demand, and this demand is not going to go away. Because if we go from 7 billion to 8 to 9 to 10 to 12, all these numbers that you've already heard, if we don't figure out a way to produce food for these people, you all are also old enough to know how populations have been balanced in the past. Disease, famine, wars because you want to take something from somebody else. And I don't want that for my children or my grandchildren. But maybe I'm wasting my time. Where does food come from? Right? You know this, but your neighbors don't know this. Food doesn't come from the grocery store. They do not grow it in the back. It requires a farmer. It requires somebody to grow something and grow a lot of it and grow it well and grow it to standards to feed you and I and your neighbors who take for granted that when they go into Schnucks, they're going to find full shelves, a full produce section, a full meat section there. That's what we expect. We don't know any different. USDA projections. 40% of our veggies are going to be coming from someplace by 2012. What year is this? Whoops. Yeah. So, get on my little soapbox here. The U.S. will be a net food importer in 50 years? Every time I fill up my car with gas, I got somebody smiling at me from someplace else in the world because we can't control our energy production. Now we're going to turn our food production over to somebody else? Everybody knows how much they love Americans, and I'm sure they'll sell us an apple for $27.50, right? So this is not a good idea or a good projection per Jerry Hayes' opinion, because it just won't work. This is a potential result. Thank you very much. Comments, questions, suggestions? Yes, sir. Stand up, introduce yourself. A big, loud voice. Yeah, no, excellent question. So the question is, why haven't breeding programs been developed to develop a bee that will be more resistant to Varroa mite in this case? The problem that they found in breeding schemes, because beekeepers and breeders have done this, USDA has done this, is that honeybees mate with multiple drones. A virgin honeybee queen, when she leaves a colony and goes to mate, she mates in the air with 20 to 40 different drones, which are males. They all contribute sperm and their genetics that are stored in an organ in her body called a spermatheca, kind of in layers, convoluted layers. Honeybees have developed this technique for genetic diversity to help survival. Because if one drone's sperm helps her produce brood that is resistant to something, that's good. Another one may not be, but then she can use that sperm up. And so this genetic diversity allows the colony to maybe not swing for a home run, but swing for the averages. And they can breed bees that have hygienic behavior, that can recognize Varroa mites, that can groom themselves more. The problem is that once that genetic material that has been done by artificial insemination, you wouldn't think they can artificially inseminate a queen, but they can do single drone inseminations and develop those queens. When those queens are dispersed to distributors, and then those queen breeders produce queens to sell to the market, all these queens are open mated, and you can't control all the drones that are in these drone congregation areas that the queen goes to. So she will get some of those genetics, and she'll get some of some other beekeepers or the wild bees living in the trees, and that trait drops off precipitously. It only lasts about 2 or 3 years. And because we have such shallow, narrow genetics and only a few queen breeders in the United States, they haven't been able to do that as well as they would like. Follow-up question? Stand up.
But it only drops off because you have beekeepers treating hives with chemicals. Those bees survive so that they can fly out and mate with the bees that might be resistant, and therefore dilutes the genetic trait that you want.
Yes, no, absolutely right. And so how you change an industry, how you change a mindset, how you change a model is, we confront that in everything in our lives every day. And so yes, are you right? That would be the perfect model, but no one has been able to pull that off as yet. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I'm Peggy Beard, and I'm a 4th grade teacher at Sheldon Performing Arts St. Louis City Schools. And Sunday when I was at my sister's house for breakfast, my nephew was there with his wife and daughter, and she's 1 year old. And Ellie said that she's not supposed to have anything with honey on it because the doctors are afraid of botulism. Is that a recent fear, or has that always been around, not to feed honey to babies?
Yeah, so the question is, why is there a warning on honeybees not to feed honey to babies? And this started several decades ago. The folk wisdom years ago was that when babies were constipated, that you should feed them honey. It would help relieve constipation. Botulism spores are everywhere. They're on your purse, they're on my finger, they're everywhere, they're on the doorknob, they're everywhere. But our bodies, because they're older, have learned to deal with that organism. It's anaerobic. That means it lives without oxygen. There was a baby decades ago that was constipated. The mother fed the baby honey, as mothers had done for hundreds of years. Botulism spores are in everything. We're in the baby because the baby is too small to have developed its own immunity. Botulism is anaerobic. Constipation is an anaerobic condition. It grew, and the baby died. And so from then on, they said, let's wait for the babies, the children, to get older because they're going to be exposed to botulism in all sorts of other ways, and they will develop their own immunity, and then we can suggest that. So that's why that warning label is on there. Yeah, no, excellent question. The question is if beekeepers have to dress up in hazmat suits to add products to control Varroa, what does that do to honey? The one with the respirator, they were using a formic acid product, which is an acid, and it vaporizes and it burns tissue and what have you. That's why they did that. These other products for Varroa control, label instructions say do not use or do not apply when the bees are actually gathering nectar and honey to collect and perhaps feed to you. So there are times of the year when beekeepers, and there's not flowers blooming, that they could apply this material after they've taken off honey to reduce exposure. But do they reduce it 100%? No, they sure don't. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the question is, why doesn't honey spoil? Honey is hygroscopic. Honey moisture is about 18%. Nectar is 70 to 90% water. Bees bring it in. They add some enzymes to it and some other things. And then they basically, because of the temperature and humidity of the hive, are able to evaporate that water from nectar and bring that nectar down to 18% or below. At that level, it's very dry. So if a bacteria, fungus, yeast, anything, wants to grow in that honey, it can't, because that honey will basically suck the moisture right out of that organism and kill it. So it is shelf stable for a long time. They found honey in Pharaoh's tombs that's 2,000 years old. And so this is nature's preservative. Remember, bees have to collect a lot of nectar to make a lot of honey to make it through a long, cold German winter from October till June. And so they have to have a consistent, safe food supply for themselves, and that's what they've come up with. Yes, ma'am.
Is Monsanto not claiming any responsibility at all in any of the pesticides they might put out themselves? CCD, are they not part of the problem also?
First, Monsanto doesn't make chemicals. They certainly buy them and use them on seed treatments. No doubt about that. And that's why one of the reasons they hired me, because they want to take a closer look at this. To date, there's not been any data to show that any of these chemicals are directly related to CCD. There was an article, 2010, in PLOS ONE by Van Ingelsdorp, if I'm not mistaken, that did an epidemiological study of CCD, and golly, I forget how many factors. 100 different, let's say, I'm making this up, so this is going to be wrong. 100 different factors, what the bees were treated with, how much they weighed, what was the dimensions of their abdomen, how long were their wings, blah, 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 to see if there was some correlation in that colony to CCD in those colonies. And what they found was coumaphos in the bees, coumaphos in the bee bread, and coumaphos in the wax. Those were the three. That stood out. Coumaphos in the bees, 100%. So, yes, could there be other things? Absolutely, positively. And so that's why we want to move away from chemicals. And theoretically, we can make this RNA thing work so that we can get away from chemicals. Chemicals are not a good idea anywhere because whether it's corn earworms or rootworms or Varroa mites, develop resistance to stuff. And you don't want to be using chemicals all the time. And getting back, just let me tell you about seed treatments. Everybody's picking on seed treatments. Could be. I don't know. I don't have any data for that. But how old are you? Wow, you don't look it. I was going to say, all right. But if you're an old guy like me who grew up in a farming area, you remember farmers spraying acre after acre after acre with stuff so that they could keep bugs from eating the crop so that they could sell it and feed their family. An acre is about 44,000 square feet. So they were spraying everything, getting it on everything and in the soil and everything else. The next thing they went to was some of these things in furrows. They put it in furrows as they planted the seeds. That reduced the exposure. Next, they went to these seed treatments to make it focused, targeted. And I had some folks at work do me the calculations. For corn, I don't know what it is for anything else, but for corn treated seed on an acre will have 24 square feet of insecticide exposed to the environment in comparison to 44,000 square feet, the old way to do it. Is it a perfect system? Nothing's perfect, but in my mind, 24 square feet's a lot better than 44,000 square feet. So, you know, we have to think about this as well. Yes, sir.
My name is Steve Tommy. I teach AP Environmental Science high school, Bloomberg High School in St. Louis. Thank you for educating me. It's not my area of expertise. I've been very much educated tonight.
Thanks.
Neonicotinoids is my question. I have read several articles, including a 60-minute story maybe 3 years ago. And so I'm curious why you haven't mentioned the newer pesticide neonicotinoids and it being banned in parts of Europe and its possible relationship to this, if you could educate me on that.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I wasn't ignoring it. I was just waiting for somebody to ask. Neonics. Chemical companies are always looking for products that will control insects that eat our crops, that feed us, that feed our cattle, that feed our chickens, and everything else. And so they're looking for chemicals that have low mammalian toxicity. These neonics work just like nicotine by attacking certain mechanisms in your cell. So any of you smokers, be warned, okay? Neonics have low mammalian toxicity. And so they've been adopted for just about anything. Look on your dog and cat flea collar, look at what the termite guys are using, look at what they're using on crops, look at what they use for head lice for kids, has low mammalian toxicity. So that's why it's been so widely adopted. The problem seems to be that some of these things are becoming systemic in plants and appearing in the nectar and the pollen, not in acute doses, but in low doses that might be chronic. And there's some data out there that shows that exposure of honeybees, in this case, to some of these things causes some behavioral changes that we don't really understand. And so we're looking at this. And so beekeepers in Europe saw 10 years ago that their bees in France, especially around sunflowers that were using this, saw some colony deaths, some colony weakening, and had the products banned. They did data and it came back showing nothing, and then they reinstated it and what have you. Recently they had a meeting at the EU, March 15th I think it was, to talk about a 2-year ban on these things. They couldn't come to a consensus in the EU about what to do, so they're going back and repolling the EU members to find out. EU farmers are, swallowing their tongue because these products work so well on their crops that it's going to mean they can't grow their crops as efficiently, which means that they're not going to produce as much stuff and what have you. So this has changed from emotion to politics. And I think politics is probably going to win for a short while on this one until they probably figure out what's going on, and then they'll go back to science. But neonics are used because they don't kill you and they don't kill me, but they kill bugs really, really well. And unfortunately, we love a bug. And so you got this conundrum right here. That lady right behind you, I think, had her hand up. Did you two talk? Yes, sir. You're never an ex-beekeeper. You're always a beekeeper.
My question is, you can have a couple of hive boxes, several hive boxes side by side, and within a few days, several thousand bees in one of the hive boxes disappear.
Mm-hmm.
The others are still functioning, but you never see a dead bee in the hive box where they disappear. Where do they go?
Yeah, okay, so here's a longish answer for that. Excellent question again. So where are these bees going in CCD colonies that I said they just disappeared, they're beamed up, what have you? Let me get a sip of water here, hang on a second. Feel like Mark Rubio now, don't I? Picture this. Picture all those things that we talked about. You got Varroa mites. You got immunosuppression. You got those benign latent viruses that were being kept in check by the honeybee's immune system. And now because of this immunosuppression, they're growing. You have nosema. You have a poor diet. You're loaded on a truck to California. And none of this is good stuff. Let's say that in a perfect world, in the summertime, a bee lives for 6 weeks. And then she's gone. She's supposed to be replaced. She wears herself out. Let's say that you decrease her lifespan by 3 days because of all these things that are impacting her health. So instead of living 6 weeks, she lives, 5 weeks and 4 days or whatever it is. That means that when she dies prematurely, that the bees behind her have to be recruited to fill her spot. She's a forager. So they have to recruit, say, nurse bees to fill her spot. Now you have less nurse bees to feed the developing baby bees that have to be produced, and the queen can't keep up laying as many eggs as you need for that replacement value. So very quickly, those bees can go out into the environment. They know they're sick, and what honeybees do when they know they're sick, many times if they can, is sacrifice themselves. They get out of the colony to protect their sisters from whatever they have because they don't feel good. So they go out and they simply die out in the environment. And now you have this colony that can't keep up with replacement value, and in a matter of just a few weeks, the colony population drops precipitously, amazingly. And this is what we think is happening in CCD because of all these things working together, synergistically together to impact honeybee health. And you don't have to impact it very much. 2 or 3 days will mess up that honeybee ecosystem that we talked about. Yes, ma'am.
What about native bees and bumblebees?
Yeah, great question. What about native bees? Bumblebees, solitary bees. First, let me put a plug in for those. Tremendous pollinators. Many times better pollinators than honeybees. They don't live in big colonies. Most of them are solitary, like bumblebees, will have a nest of maybe 500 or so. But very, very good pollinators. The problem with them using in production agriculture is that you can't bring a colony of 50,000 to a field, or 500 with 50,000 to a field. They are seasonal many times, have small populations, and so in some situations they're great, but for our production agriculture we have right now, really haven't figured out how to use them efficiently. They have not been impacted, we don't think, in a CCD-like way. Bumblebee populations are dropping, but the thought is they don't know whether it's forage availability, location availability, or some of these chemicals that are being exposed to, or diseases. One of the problems that has been found is that bumblebees can be used very efficiently in greenhouses to pollinate stuff. Honeybees can't. Honeybees bang themselves to death on the glass ceilings. But anyway, that's another talk. Can be used in greenhouses. But these bees are imported, sometimes from Europe, sometimes from Canada, and they're bringing in some diseases that are affecting our native pollinators. And so you have that pressure. One bumblebee, Bombus franklini, I think, is already thought to be extinct. Other populations are low. We have some solitary bees that are out there, but they really haven't been tremendously tracked because, and I hate to say low economic importance, because if you really calculated it, it would be probably pretty significant. But they aren't tracked as much. But we have no data to indicate that they're affected in a CCD-like way. Do they get diseases? Are they affected by some chemicals? Yeah, absolutely, positively. Yes, sir.
My name is Jason. I'm a biology student at Cambridge University. My question is, with regards to this RNA and RNAi, what is there a specific type of RNA that you're targeting on trying to fix, and if so, what does it?
Yeah, for instance, we started out with RNA to affect a virus early on in colony collapse disorder. It was called Israeli acute paralysis virus. And as you know, viruses get in your cells, take over your cell's machinery, and make more of them. That's what viruses do. And so what we found was that we could, on that particular virus, the genome had been sequenced. So we knew what to target in the bee's genome. So we could feed an RNAi to bees in sugar syrup. They would take it in, get in each of their cells, and it wouldn't stop the viruses from replicating in cells that they were already in, but it would inhibit them in the other cells that they tried. And so we could control Israeli paralysis virus that way. What we want to do for Varroa, since the Varroa genome has been sequenced and honeybee genome is sequenced, is find those things that aren't homologous and see if we can target multiples of those. But this is really early. We know we can get it in a honeybee. We don't know if we can get enough of it in the cells as Varroa feeds on it, so we have a lot to learn, but that was a great question. Yes, sir?
What about nature as far as balancing out your bees' resistance to some of these things that are attacking?
You mean like breeding them, or?
No, about we lost a large number of honeybee colonies to tracheomite many years ago.
Right.
Now a lot of the bees that are around are resistant to tracheomite.
Right.
How long will it take them to develop resistance, and is anybody looking for a sterile colony to survive?
Yeah, and so we had another mite from Europe introduced in the early 1980s called a tracheal mite that lived in a honeybee's breathing tubes and devastated the industry at that time. Wiped out most of the bees before somebody could find a treatment regimen. So it was Darwin in action. And get back into this gentleman's question, which was excellent. If we keep using miticides to prop up the population, bees will never develop resistance. The quandary there is that when Varroa mite was introduced, if we had let all the honeybees be killed, there would have been small populations that would have had some level of resistance or something. But agriculture, pollinator-dependent agriculture, would have collapsed because we couldn't have done anything about it. So this is this catch-22 that we really haven't figured out very well as yet. And so this is why we want to look at different things. Yes, sir?
And my question is, how about Asian honeybees? Is there any ideas of maybe hybridization or using this as an alternative?
Right. So the question is, Asian honeybees, Varroa came from an Asian species of honeybee. Why don't we bring those over? One of the concerns is they have additional diseases, viruses that are endemic in their populations and don't want to bring those over. In fact, Australia was exporting some honeybees to the United States because we were losing so badly. One of those bees, Apis cerana, had gone from New Guinea into northern Australia, and so we stopped importation because of the fear of them bringing in other mites. There's another mite, triple Elaps clari, and there's other diseases. And so we keep European honeybees because I said they build big populations, they store a lot of honey, and that's our relationship with them. The Asian species of bees, Apis cerana, is about the only other one that can be managed. It has small colonies, smaller colonies. In Southeast Asia, it produces a couple kilos of honey a year, and so it just doesn't do what we want it to do. Plus, it's a tropical, subtropical insect that doesn't do very well, above the Mason-Dixon line. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Wanda, and I'm not a scientist or anything.
Then sit down, Wanda, okay?
But I am a consumer, and I'm a homeowner, and so I guess I was just wondering, for us non-scientists out here that can't, help figure out what's going on, is there anything, like top 2, top 3 things you would recommend as far as, things that we can do as regular people to help, with the whole issue?
Yeah, no, that's a tremendous question because I've been spreading doom and gloom. Did everybody hear Wanda's question? What can this group do to help honeybees help this insect? It's a terrific question. And I guess all of you are in this room tonight because you love honeybees in one way or another, are concerned about them, and they impact you directly. The food you eat, your environment, the birds in your backyard, the squirrels, and what have you. So what I would like, I guess a message that I would like to share with you is for you to be advocates for this insect, and hopefully have that advocacy coalesce into a movement. What is an advocate? Is it somebody shy and retiring and doesn't want to talk to anybody? No. It's somebody who's kind of obnoxious probably sometimes. Not afraid, open, honest, and I can see some of you are pretty obnoxious already. So I was watching them. She was patting him on the leg. That's why I said that. To be advocates, to speak up, to express. Go to the city council meetings. Go to your homeowners association. Go to schools. Go to the Elks Club, the Kiwanis. We have a guy in the White House that was a community organizer. Those kind of things, that type of grassroots advocacy that will translate into a movement. How did we go from, how did the organic movement start? The same kind of thing. It started with 1 or 2 people advocating something different, and then having others buy into that, and then that turned into larger groups that turned into a movement that would talk and advertise and what have you for that movement. And so if you could come out of this meeting tonight with that type of resolve to be an advocate, to not be a shrinking violet, but to speak up, to stand up, to do these kind of things, that is going to get more attention than anything, not only in our community, in the public, but politically as well. So, Wanda, you're in charge, okay? Yes, ma'am.
One, I'm from Master in Missouri. I haven't heard anything much recently about the Africanized bees, like they were coming and they were coming.
Yeah. And I moved from Florida, like I said, about a year ago. And we found Africanized bees on my watch while I was there. When I left, we had had 3 human deaths. We were up, I don't know, 100 dogs, goats and pigs and chickens, thousands of non-fatal stinging incidents. And it was a real concern for me, because what I didn't want happen was for beekeepers to be zoned and ordinanced out of beekeeping because of fear. So we did best management practices and what have you. Cut to the chase is that those bees are moving. They will move. They're moving up right now. They're in Mississippi. They are tropical, subtropical insects, so they will like that better. But there are some parts of the industry produce their own queens. And you can produce queens to send to a beekeeper pretty early if you start out in Texas. And we talked about these queens open mating and how you really can't control the drone population. So if you have a queen that mates with, say, 20 drones, let's say 10 of them are from European managed colonies and 10 of them from African colonies, the grumpy defensive gene is dominant. So you can have a queen that you send to somebody in St. Louis from Texas that'll be pretty nice, depending on whose sperm she's using. And when she migrates to somebody else's, they can be chasing you in the kitchen. So that's my big concern about Missouri, is that these things can be sent all over the place. They found Africanized bees at the 8,000-foot level in Flagstaff, because what they seem to be doing is when they do mate, because they can mate with our European drones, is that they're co-opting genes that will allow them to survive in cooler climates, but still retaining the grumpy part. And so, yes, will they be here? Are they here now? When I was in Florida, I was the president of the Apiary Inspectors of America, because every state has somebody like that. And I challenged my colleagues. I said, send me some samples, and I will find Africanized genetics in your state. And you know how many took me up on that? Yeah, zip. So, yeah, will it happen? And so for you beekeepers in here, man, you got to prepare ahead of time, because the media loves blood and gore, and they love, somebody's dead Shih Tzu on the sidewalk. They will come to you, and you will be the problem. So you have to get your act together and say, well, we've done this, we've trained fire departments, we have BMPs, and it takes all the fun out of it for media. So, all right, one more question, and I got to go. Yes, sir.
My name is Tim Herzl. I'm a retired chemist. And I've already addressed one issue of chemical coating on the seeds and how that created a benefit of reducing the amount of total
Exposure. Sure.
And yet it's there on the
Sure.
seed, and the issue has been raised that we might
Mhm.
Another technology that's being developed recently is to genetically modify the seeds for certain agricultural crops so that chemicals are produced by the plant itself,
Mhm.
by herbs, fungicides, or whatever. And so, that even more reduces the generalized exposure to the environment by the chemical. What can you shed on the question of whether now that it's being systemically used in the plant itself, might be presently whether these could have impact on the bee population?
Sure. And so the question is genetically modified seeds, those seeds that have a gene that instead of taking 10,000 years to come up with a corn seed, Anybody here seen Teosinte? That is the ancestor, the ancestor of corn. It looks like something you pull out of your yard. It doesn't look corn-like at all. And so it's taken 10,000 years to turn that into a corn we knew because of natural mutations and mutations caused by viruses and what have you. And so what some companies have done is say, we don't want to wait 10,000 years. For instance, on some corn seeds, they've inserted a gene for Bacillus thuringiensis, BT. This is a bacteria, produces a toxin that kills Lepidoptera, mostly moths, very well. Organic farmers use it all the time because it's safe for you, it's safe for me and the dog, but it kills caterpillar kind of things from moths and what have you. And so organic farmers use it. So what they did was, instead of doing that, let's take that gene and put it in a corn seed and have that plant express that BT toxin and control corn earworms and rootworms and what have you better than having to spray. And so that has been done. Because it's only specific for Lepidoptera, it has no effect on insects like honeybees. And so that's probably been a pretty successful thing. What other things might be out there? I know they screen because they don't want to have any off-target effects because that just causes people problems. So, thank you for your time tonight. If you have any more questions, Google me, find my email. I'll be more than happy to help you. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we are all in this together to do better, to work together. And Wanda, you're going to be an advocate, right? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.